Welcome to this very special edition of the KAJ Masterclass Live, the show which ensures that you profit from your time spent here with experts, either through the industry insights, information, or simply learning from them. And today we have Jill Sitnick. She is an author, a speaker, an advocate for psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy for PTSD. Welcome to the show, Jill.
Thank you. Thank you so much, AJ. Thrilled to be here.
You are welcome to the show, Jill. You are welcome to India in this online form. And I'm sure not just in India, but a lot of people across the globe will get better educated about PTSD, about healing, and various options that are available for patients of PTSD. My first question to you, Jill, is you have been into education, 25 years of education tech expertise, worked with great companies, Microsoft, Amazon. So why are you talking about more? Why you are an advocate of this particular thing, psychedelic assisted psychotherapy? I want to understand this part so that the audience understand who is Jill Sitnick and understands more about you, so that they know the backdrop of what advice they are getting or information that they are getting.
Sure. I actually get that question a lot. How did you become a corporate? How were you a corporate girly? And now you're talking about mental illness and psychedelics to treat mental illness. So the very long story short is that I was diagnosed with PTSD at 47 after the death of my long-term partner. I was completely surprised. I didn't have any idea that my gung-ho type A personality was really symptomatic of PTSD. My therapist at the time was training to become a psychedelic-assisted psychotherapist. She said, go take a look at the research over at maps.org, MAPS.org, the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies, because they are running the clinical trials to test MDMA, or what's very often known as Molly or ecstasy. They are using that compound to treat PTSD with amazing results. And I agreed to the therapy. After a year and 3 therapeutic journeys, I no longer qualified for a PTSD diagnosis. And trying to get in front of, I'm in the US, the FDA in the US has just received all the paperwork to go ahead and see if they are going to approve this therapy. So I turned my corporate girly career into an advocate in the hopes that my voice can help drive the idea that this is actually a fantastic healing modality. And hopefully, at least in the US, the FDA will go ahead and approve. Australia already has approved. Canada's already thinking about it. So I think as more countries start to understand the healing modality, it will spread globally. So that's me. That's me. I tried to make it short.
Thank you, Jill. Thank you. Now, I want to understand, I don't know anything about all these things, neither PTSD. I just know the term. I'm just trying to understand it for the audience. I don't know about psychedelics. I don't know anything. So I will try and learn from you for the audience so that they better. PTSD has been around for quite a number of years, and doctors have been treating it with whatever options they consider best for the patients they have.
Right.
Is that enough or not enough? Why do people think that they need to look at something else? Is it because it's a good market, good business for others, or is it because there is actually a need for more drugs related to PTSD? I want to understand this. Is it not curable? Is it not enough at the present time that we need to meander onto different paths?
Oh my gosh, that might be the best question I've ever gotten from a podcast host. So thank you. Yes. So in the States, in the US, we have, according to the research I found, we have over 100 veterans a day who attempt or commit suicide due to PTSD symptoms. We have millions of people in the US, not just military, people like me with child abuse or some sort of trauma from a sexual assault or just a general accident. Trauma can come from anywhere. And unfortunately, right now, the medications that are available aren't making the kind of impact that MDMA for PTSD can. When you have a clinical trial that says 3/4 of the people in the clinical trial no longer qualify for a PTSD diagnosis after 3 therapeutic journeys, that's pretty huge. The fact that countries are taking their time to understand the clinical research before jumping into a business model also shows that this isn't kind of a get rich quick, just a new pill to kind of take. This is a therapy modality that, at least in the States, is needed. And my guess, considering the craziness going on in the globe, that PTSD is not just limited to the States. It's a global issue, and this could be a solution to help millions of people.
Right, right. Let me understand from your own journey into this particular issue.
Sure.
You had, childhood, if I understand, childhood trauma induced PTSD.
Yep.
Then you went on to work for big companies, responsible positions. How did you deal with PTSD till that point in time? When did the alternative that you are talking about come into your life? How was your life then? Were the drugs not enough, or what was there a need? I want to understand a bit more about your journey into about PTSD.
Again, incredibly insightful question. What I have learned is that when someone who suffers from trauma, and I had pretty intense child abuse, pretty intense food insecurity, housing insecurity throughout my childhood. I was incredibly lucky to meet a man who, in essence, regulated my nervous system. I still had anxiety behaviors, but honestly, I just thought I had a bad childhood. I'm a type A person. I'm very driven. Like, this is just how life is. It wasn't till 18 months after he passed, I had the widow's fog. It wasn't until 18 months after his passing, I got a work email, and a work email that on the stress level was like a level 1. And I internally flipped out. My stomach was upset. My head was all in knots. I couldn't sleep. My shoulders were up to my ears. I was 1,000% sure that I was going to lose my job off of this little email. I was never going to be able to get another job. I was going to lose my house. I was going to be living in a car with my bird. Like, my mind went 1,000 miles an hour to an awful existence. And that's kind of what PTSD does. It puts the person, no matter what time in their life they are, it puts that person with whatever trigger back to a time where that trauma was not healed. I was thrown out of both parents' homes. I lived in poverty. I knew what it was like to have $25 to survive for the week and eating pasta. My system flipped out. And so there was no medication up to that point. I was on Wellbutrin, which was, I think, an antidepressant, I'm not sure, for the grief. But the PTSD came while I was on Wellbutrin, so that was not a solution. Did I capture all parts of the question? I'm not sure.
Yes, you have. But then, as I said, this is something more needs to be done. That is what FDA is still, US FDA is also trying to learn through all the documents that people have submitted about this particular new sort of a breakthrough that you may want to call it. From a point of view of the audience, I need to understand it better so that they get the best understanding from different experts who have dealt with these things. So I want to understand, in terms of PTSD, were there no other options available at that point? What did your doctors say? Did they say they did not have anything beyond what they were offering? Or is it that you found that, okay, something else is much more readily available, that is much more, the outcome is much, much better?
Well, so when I came to my therapist had helped me with my grief work. I didn't go into therapy until after my partner passed, and I considered it a treat. I actually didn't have a lot of faith in therapy. My mother had gone through various therapists her entire life, was clinically depressed, had been on various drugs, and ultimately, even 3 years before she passed away, had again tried to commit suicide. So I had very little faith in talk therapy. But after my partner passed, it became very clear to me that I needed an outlet for the grief. That relationship with my therapist ebbed and flowed as my grief needed it. When this PTSD episode happened and my entire body was just in absolute flight. I was just so terrified. When I went back to her, we spent months, I mean months, trying to figure out why my body was flipping out. And as we kind of narrowed down some of the symptoms, and I always go like this because my chest was tight or my shoulders were high or my stomach was upset, I would start talking about childhood memories, being beaten as a toddler, being thrown around the room when I was 10, being thrown out of my home when I was 10, being thrown out of my home when I was 16, like some of these pretty awful memories. And even with talking through those memories, my symptoms weren't going away. And that's what a lot of people who have PTSD are living with. Some people are super successful with talk therapy. People like me, I was months into the talk therapy just for this PTSD reaction, and I was not seeing any improvement. And that's why my doctor, remember, it is not approved yet in the United States. So this was all underground. My doctor was taking a chance to even offer it to me. And I was suicidal at that point. I looked at this as, why the heck not? I might as well try it. Here's something that actually has been proven to work. Whereas the talk therapy for months wasn't even making a dent. And my therapist is good. No shade on my therapist.
Okay, okay. Proven to work where? In Australia or in other places? I want to understand about that. Were you not afraid of any sort of side effects? Because whatever little research I could understand, there is talk about hallucinations and other side effects that one may get worried about before trying anything new. What made you
Oh
so
my
sure
gosh.
about it? What was it that made you go for it?
Again, fantastic question. Okay, so if first of all, I was after looking at the clinical research that had started in 2017. So there was already a history of the research going on. And if you read Michael Pollan's How to Change Your Mind, you'll learn that the research was actually going on way before the war on drugs. Like this is actually not a new thing, even though most people are hearing about it for the first time. So that was the first thing. Secondly, working with psychedelics in this particular modality, I was going to be working with my therapist and a medical doctor. There should be two people in the room with the patient at the time. So I knew I was getting medical grade MDMA. The street name is called ecstasy or Molly. Like I wasn't going down the street and picking something up and just taking a drug. I was being monitored by my therapist and my doctor because journeys can last anywhere from 5 to 8 hours. And with that kind of safety around the experience, and it took a solid 3-4 months for me to even get ready because I had all the stereotypes myself. Like when she first suggested psychedelics, like I had all these images of like, I don't know, I'm Generation X. So in the States, we had the egg in the frying pan. This is your brain on drugs. I was scared. But MDMA is not your classic psychedelic. You don't get the crazy visuals that can be super fun and all that kind of stuff. MDMA is actually an empathogen. It's a heart opener. It makes your body calm down so that trauma patients like myself can finally start having a conversation about things that are scary without our body flipping out. And in having that conversation, we get to see our life from now an adult perspective versus the toddler perspective. So yes, I was a little bit scared. I had really no experience with drugs, but I was with two people that I had vetted who were medical professionals the way that it should be. And again, I didn't really see any other way out.
Right, right,
Yeah.
Jill. So, when one takes, go for psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy, what is the
Mhm.
session like? You have that thing. Is it in solid form? Is it from liquid form? It is in smoke form. What form do you intake it? How much time does it take for it to impact? And also any side effects in your case that you saw or in other cases that because you are an advocate for this, I want to understand for the audience. Secondly, This is still not, officially okay in the US. People may
Right.
prescribe it. You are waiting for the FDA approval, US FDA approval for this. But till now, it is illegal if we want to, if we can call it. Can we?
Yes. I like to say underground versus illegal because it's happening all over the place. But all right, so in terms of there was a few questions in there. Let's talk very specifically about the day. First of all, I was screened. I don't have any schizophrenia in my family. I don't have any mania. I don't have any psychosis. My diagnosis was PTSD. So I want to be really clear about that. Number two, MDMA is taken in pill form, at least in my case. And so I had a measured dose. I don't talk about dosages publicly, but I had a measured dose according to my weight. On average, an MDMA journey can last anywhere from 5 to 8 hours, depending upon how open the patient was. My very first journey was like a solid 5 hours because I was kind of scared and didn't know what was going on. But my two subsequent journeys lasted easily 7 or 8 hours. 2 people in the room. In terms of side effects, because my dosage was appropriate, because I was screened, and because I was in a very safe environment, I didn't experience any sort of negative side effects. The day after an MDMA journey, you kind of feel, I kind of describe it a little bit like a hangover. You definitely want to sleep, you want to nap because, and I'm not a doctor, I don't go into this big time, but there is a serotonin release in your brain. So the next day you might feel a little down, a little tired, and you have just done a lot of emotional work. So that kind of makes sense. But other than that, I didn't experience any sort of negative thing. And even supplements, there's a lot of research going on about supplements that you can take before and after the journey to even alleviate kind of that feeling of hangover afterward. And I think the other thing to just be super clear about, Australia has already approved MDMA therapy for PTSD. United States will probably approve it in 2024. Canada's also looking at it. Those are kind of the countries that show up on my news feeds. And as soon as other countries see the success rate, I would be shocked if it doesn't travel globally.
Right, Jill. The final outcome for any sort of a illness doctors always look at is the cure part, or at
Yep.
least they can continue to manage it as well as possible. What is the focus of psychedelic assisted psychotherapy? Is it addictive? Is it about cure? Or is it have to be, people who have no cure till now of PTSD, if they opt for this, they will have to continue with this for a long time. What is it? Is it about, is it about PTSD also? Is it the same thing? Is it addictive? It's not, or yes, I don't know about it. So you got to tell me about your, and what about the other options that we are talking, or you talk or advocate?
Yeah, so that's really a great question. So people who aren't familiar with psychedelics might think that psychedelics act like any sort of other drug that potentially like a really dangerous, like a heroin or something else. And I'm not a big drug user, so I just threw that out. No shade if somebody's using heroin, whatever. But or like crack cocaine, I think is like super addictive. MDMA is not that. You have people who are taking MDMA to go relax at parties and things of that sort. There's no sort of addictive quality there. Same thing with magic mushrooms. So there isn't any sort of like, oh, I'm going to take this and I'm going to get addicted. Whereas some other hard drugs, absolutely, there's some health risks. So that was the first question. The second question I think is super interesting. This is actually a solution. In the States, we tend to in my opinion, we tend to overprescribe for mental illness, that you have people who are on antidepressant drugs for 10, 15, 20 years. My treatment was over the course of 1 year, 3 therapeutic journeys. I have continued my talk therapy. I have occasionally done a journey on like a vacation retreat out of the country to kind of work on some other trauma. But at the end of the day, for a PTSD clinical diagnosis to no longer have that diagnosis, I was done after a year. And so that is tremendous compared to our normal policy of we just have people on these drugs for, decades. So it's a very different healing modality. Our insurance system in the States is trying to figure out how it will work. If you think of talk therapy as like a 2-lane road, psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy for PTSD is like the superhighway. It moves faster. I hope that explains it.
Right. So when was the last time you had your therapy, or you did not have to have it since how long? Or as you said, you took it for a
Years.
year and then it was done.
Yes. And since then, like the way I like to say it is that my therapy with my doctors took care of like the big giant capital T traumas. At the end of that cycle, I was no longer suicidal. I knew there was a future. I was also very aware that I was still getting triggered by certain things. So I've continued to stay in my therapeutic relationship. I've had occasional journeys. But that was, my gosh, I hate to admit, it's been years at this point.
Okay. Okay. Maybe I want to understand one more thing. People who are having present, regimen or protocol that they are following in terms of normal things that have been suggested by their normal doctors,
Yep.
are they also thinking of, in terms of that, okay, if we are not able to, the present regimen or present drugs that are available for PTSD, they are not enough. So let psychedelic assisted psychotherapy come in for a bit and then it goes away. Can it work together, or does it have to be one of the two? Are there side effects if they are going to work together? I want to understand, because in the coming days that you are hopeful of this US FDA approval, I want to understand how this whole thing is going forward. Because this then it, if US FDA passes it, then the world will look at it much more closely.
I think the answer to your question is that I did have to using a psychedelic, or in my experience, using MDMA for PTSD, I needed to be off of any other drug. Like I had to stop my Wellbutrin prescription easily. I think it was like 8 weeks before I did the psychedelic, because I'm not a doctor. Don't quote me on this. It's something like SSRIs can actually block the psychedelic impact or something of that sort. So I know for me, I was told you need to go into this without any sort of other drug in your system. And of course, that can be super scary and kind of make that first journey even more intense. And I get that. But I have a funny feeling that's going to be the prescribed protocol moving forward, at least right now with the research that exists. I do think the next 10, 15 years, I mean, there's like hundreds of clinical trials out there for different psychedelics. MAPS, like I said, got the MDMA for PTSD. One of our universities, Johns Hopkins, they got the breakthrough therapy for magic mushrooms and depression, or psilocybin and depression. So there's a plethora of studies out there. So what I experienced and what I was told right now might not be the same in 5 years, but as of right now, you have to be clear of any prescribed medication for mental health. I'm like, if you have diabetes or something, I'm sure you can keep taking that. But I hope that answers the question.
Right. These mushrooms are still very tricky to, so what I'm trying to understand as much as possible. The mushrooms that I know of are simple mushrooms that one can try at home as vegetable, that I have tried. Right. The rest of the other mushrooms that I've heard about are not so good. Those are the mushroom clouds. You talk about the nuclear and all those things. So that the world has already seen the bad impact. About these things that you call of magic mushrooms, a world will still want to understand a bit more. But let me give it to you. You have answered some difficult questions. So I will ask from you, what are the difficult questions that you keep on getting asked about this whole new sort of a thing that you call as a therapy? So help us understand, are there much more difficult questions that you have to face? Is it because companies can't talk about it because it's underground, as you want to say it? I would want to call it a different word. Is it because of that, or is it because it works better for them when patients talk directly? How does it work? I want to understand what are the difficulties that you face in advocating a thing like this.
Yeah, so in the US, there have been millions of dollars with venture capitalists backing this. Like the business model, people are ready to implement this therapy as soon as the FDA approves. So there's no issue there. The biggest issue or question I get is from everyday people. Like, I stay up on the news about this, but if you are someone who, think of me 10 years ago, where I didn't even know I had PTSD. I was not looking into mental health issues. I was just doing my job, living my life, in my relationship, just moving forward. Those kind of folks who aren't interested or aware of the work being done for mental health with psychedelics, those are actually the people I get the most pushback from. Because in the States, we had such a huge propaganda that drugs are bad and they can destroy you, and that overcoming that stereotype is just so challenging. And that's honestly why I'm here. I mean, I'm literally putting myself out there. I had a terrible childhood, I had PTSD from it, and I healed with a psychedelic. And those three things kind of put people off a little bit. But it's super important to have these kind of conversations, because you never know, the Jill from 10 years ago, if she had heard someone like me now talking, she might have said, oh, wait a minute, this is a credible voice. Let me hear more. So it's the everyday people who aren't kind of educated in any of this. And that's my role. My role is to help educate and inform them, because I'm pretty sure everyone knows someone who's experienced trauma. And with millions of people with PTSD, we probably know someone who has those symptoms too.
Right. Why are you so positive about the US FDA approval? Are you people also ready that the US FDA may say no at this point in time? I want to understand the mind of the US FDA through whatever understanding you have got.
I was going to say the mind of the FDA. So there's something called breakthrough therapy in the United States. And in the United States, breakthrough therapy or breakthrough drug therapy means that the FDA from the very beginning has recognized that a therapy has a real validity over what is presently being offered. And so MDMA therapy was labeled breakthrough therapy, back in, don't quote me, I keep saying 2017. I don't know if it happened 2016, 2017, or when it actually happened. But that designation is what has allowed the clinical trials to move quicker. The same way Johns Hopkins University in the States got breakthrough therapy designation for magic mushrooms. The psilocybin is the chemical in magic mushrooms that help the healing. They got breakthrough therapy for magic mushrooms and depression. So you have the FDA looking very, very strong. It's not like these people did clinical trials and then just showed up at the FDA's doorstep and said, hey, take a look at this. The FDA has been involved from the very start. They know pretty much what the data is going to say. They have to look at everything. But that's why I'm pretty sure, like, I would be shocked. I would be absolutely shocked if it didn't get approved, considering everybody's been looking at this healing modality so closely. And I think, I don't have the mind of the FDA. What I keep hearing is the summertime. And then in the States, our DEA, our Drug Enforcement Agency, would have to reclassify the MDMA psychedelic so that it could then be prescribed by practitioners. So even though it'll be approved, we're still a solid year away from being able to offer it to folks. Australia is moving much faster than we are.
Right, right. There is much to learn about these magic mushrooms, and for people who are, my only wish is that people who are suffering from PTSD get the best that is available to them, and they are best informed of whatever new things are coming. There is the US FDA to think about, and all other regulatory authorities in every other country that must be, and the doctors are working. So be that as it may, for a lot of people who would want to know more about you, from you, what is the best way for them to connect with you, Jay?
Super easy. Head on over to The Journey Sage on YouTube or thejourneysage.com. My YouTube channel is dedicated to educating people about what this therapy is. I have 5 to 7 minute videos going from start to finish, explaining the whole thing. And on the website, there's a lot of resources. You can reach out to me. And my books, my memoir, and my workbook are there for people who kind of want to know a little bit more about me specifically. And again, Michael Pollan's How to Change Your Mind is a great summary of the whole psychedelic renaissance. So I think people are good. Journey Sage for me, Michael Pollan, How to Change Your Mind for the bigger picture.
Wonderful. With this, it's a wrap on this very special edition of the KAJ Masterclass Live. Thank you so much indeed for joining us.